So welcome. We are back Wednesday nights and we are kicking off with a fantastic speaker to make this one of our most special Zooms that we've done to give a really big start back to our live Zooms. We have one of the world's top experts tonight on Iran and Middle Eastern geopolitics. We thought this was a particularly topical topic right now, given the Iranian-sponsored attacks that have been happening here in Australia, in our country, in our community. The government has now expelled Iran's ambassador, and in a move which we haven't seen before, has revoked our diplomats in Tehran. We've listed the Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization. So this is really an important conversation where we're going to deep dive into what's going on and the facts. Our guest tonight is Dr. Meir Javedanfar. He's an Iranian-born Israeli commentator, author, academic, and he lectures at the Reichman University. He's coming to us live tonight from Israel. He regularly contributes to leading outlets like Foreign Affairs and The Guardian. We are very privileged to have such a wonderful guest here tonight. He's going to give a presentation to us and we will have a question and answer. So if you do have any questions, please use the raise hand function and we will get to you after Dr. Meir's presentation. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Meir Javedanfar.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. I hope you can all hear me well. The news that the Islamic Republic of Iran have been sponsoring anti-Semitic attacks in Australia was a surprise to some and old news to others. It's a surprise to some because the Islamic Republic of Iran states that it is anti-Zionist, it is not anti-Semitic. Iran has a Jewish population which has dwindled from around 100,000 estimate prior to the revolution to about 7,000. Prior to October 7th, they are generally tolerated. There are synagogues in Tehran and a Jewish school. Well, there's a Jewish school, it's mixed now because there's not enough Jewish kids there. There's kosher restaurants. So the regime says that we don't pick on Jews because they're Jews. We pick on Zionists. But in reality, the Islamic Republic of Iran has had a history of targeting Jewish communities around the world. We had an example in 1994 in Buenos Aires, the Jewish center, the AMIA bombing. The Iranian regime, through Hezbollah, carried out that bombing. At least 85 dead Argentinian Jews and Israelis, and more than hundreds were injured. And for numerous times, the Iranian regime has been caught using its influence and spies abroad to plan and planning to attack or to observe Jewish figures in countries, for example, such as Germany. So, and of course, so this, the fact that the regime says it's not anti-Semitic, this shows that the regime not only goes after Israelis, but it also goes after Jews abroad, especially. And of course, we know that the Islamic Republic of Iran is a denier of Holocaust. The supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, is a denier of the Holocaust. They've had at least 3, if I'm not mistaken, Holocaust cartoon competitions in Iran, which shows, the depravity of their hatred for Jewish history. In these cartoon competitions, they try to mock the Holocaust by saying, "Oh, it's something made up that the Israelis are using for their crimes," and it's really grotesque. So what does the Iranian regime do it? Because to the Iranian regime, Jewish communities abroad, especially in Western countries, it sees them in its perception as an extension of Israel, basically. First and foremost, it doesn't matter that you're Australian Jews. Because you're Jews, the Iranian regime sees Australian Jewish organizations, for example, or synagogues, as an extension of Israel. Number one. Number two, The Iranian regime attacks Jewish targets abroad because they are usually seen as easier targets. There's a world of difference between attacking the Israeli embassy I don't know if you have an embassy in Canberra, for example, than a shul in Sydney, because we know that Israeli embassies are far better protected by Australian police and by Israeli security officials who guard these embassies. Whereas synagogues, it's there's so many more of them. There are so much more dispersed that the Iranian regime just views attacking them as an easier target. It's to instead of to settle scores with Israel, because we know that there was a recent war between the two countries, and the Iranian regime is really trying its best to deter Israel from attacking its nuclear program and its missile program again. And one of the ways it's using is by orchestrating attacks against Jewish targets, as we saw in Australia. And I think more countries could follow in the future. Um, I have to say that the Iranian regime is really in a tight spot right now. First and foremost, they have to really congratulate the Australian government for being on top of this and for expelling the people who are responsible for this. Um, Secondly, I think the Iranian regime is finding it difficult to find targets to attack abroad, because now there is tighter cooperation between Israel and local security agencies around the world. Unfortunately, I think what we saw in Australia will not be the last. I think there could be more attacks by the regime, um, because the regime feels that its deterrence has been greatly undermined. It was caught out unprepared, very badly unprepared, when it was attacked on 12th of June, the 13th of June, sorry, for the 12-day war by the State of Israel. The Iranian regime did not expect that attack. They believed that Israel will never dare do this. And they were caught out by the sophistication of the attack, by the precise intelligence that Israel had. I think 15 or 20 officials were killed, mostly in their beds, simultaneously, like in a window of almost 2 hours in 20 different parts of Tehran. The State of Israel also attacked Iranian nuclear scientists, top ranked second tier and third tier nuclear scientists. And also, the Israeli Air Force attacked labs and even archives of the nuclear program. Iran's missile program was also another major target. Missiles that were brought out of their silos on the way to target Israel, and also missile production facilities. It is estimated that Iran has something like 2,500 missiles. Estimates range that 60, maybe 50 to 60% of them were destroyed in the war. But the concern in Israel was that had we not attacked, Iran's increasing production capacity would have allowed them to produce up to 8,000 missiles. And this is a major threat to the security of Israel, directly from Iranian territory, but also because the Islamic Republic transfers missiles to other countries. We saw there were between 100,000 to 150,000 missiles pointed at us from Lebanon, which were thankfully dismantled through an incredible operation by the use of the beepers, by the Mossad and the IDF. But we still are under attacks from Iranian missiles given to the Houthis. This morning we were just attacked. We had to go to shelters in Tel Aviv because of missiles that they are sent in parts, not completed missiles. They're sent in parts using different routes to Yemen. and then they are assembled in Yemen, and then they fired at the state of Israel. And Yemen is a very big country. It has, I think, it's 3 or 4 times the size of Syria, if not more. It's very mountainous. It's very difficult. Only 50% of the population use cell phones, which means collecting signal intelligence is notoriously difficult in a country like that. So spotting these missiles before they are launched is very difficult. Also because Yemen is a mountainous country, so this is proving to be a major challenge to us. Even though a couple of days ago Israel had a very successful attack against the top echelon of the Houthis. Never mind. Nevertheless, the missile threat is very, very present, especially from Yemen. We're just lucky that Hezbollah didn't get to use their missiles, and the few missiles that the Iranians fired that got through. I mean, they shot hundreds. If I don't know the exact number, so I don't want to say. I don't want to say thousands, maybe, I don't know, but they fired a lot of missiles at us in this war. Most of them were thankfully intercepted, but those that got through, they caused a lot of damage. Lot of damage. One of them landed here about 7 minutes walk from my house, right into a home. And by miracle, somebody must have been praying extra hard in the Sydney synagogues. The house that they built had been evacuated because it was going to be torn down to be rebuilt again. If the house had not been evacuated for being torn down, I shudder to think how many people, innocent people, would have died. And for example, the missile that got through to the Soroka hospital in Beersheba, that also very powerful missile. So we are very worried about Iran's missile capabilities. Um, um, Currently, I think the war in Gaza is also of concern because it kind of shifts attention away from what the Iranians are doing towards what is happening in Gaza. I don't want to get into the whole argument in Israel. Some people are for the government's plans to attack Gaza, to encircle Gaza, to pressure Hamas. Some people are against it. That's not part of this conversation. But what we can see is that the global airtime that it is occupying, for better use of the word, in the international press is something that is welcomed by the Iranians. And right now, as we go forward, the Iranian regime is facing a new round of sanctions because of the 2015 nuclear deal between Iran and the United States, and of course the other five major powers but the five members of the Security Council and Germany. A whole raft of sanctions were removed, but the agreement said that if Iran leaves the accord, or if Iran takes steps that are contrary to the accord, then then the members of the signatories of the nuclear accord have until October 2025 to reimpose all of the sanctions that were removed soon after the Iran nuclear deal in July 2015. And as we know, after President Trump left the nuclear deal, the Iranians started enriching uranium at 60%, which is one of the major reasons why Israel attacked. I mean, 60% to 90%, the distance is not very big, and you need 90% to make a nuclear weapon. So because the Iranians are enriching at 60%, and also because they are not cooperating with the International Atomic Energy Agency, who has requested time and again for clarifications about certain parts of Iran's nuclear program, then the Europeans have started the whole mechanism of reimposing the sanctions. Of course, it's not from here till tomorrow. You start the mechanism, it takes about a month, and then it goes to the UN Security Council, and it goes to the it doesn't even have to go to the UN Security Council. No one can veto it. It cannot be vetoed by the Chinese and the Russians. So in a month's time, if the Iranians have not returned to the table, then with serious compromises, then all of the sanctions that were removed because of the 2015 nuclear deal will be reimposed. And I cannot begin to tell you how much damage these sanctions will cause. I mean, Iran's economy is already in bad shape, but the regime, but the regime's resistance, ability to resist all these sanctions will be severely challenged, which is why I think the regime is going to try to lash out, especially from now until the new sanctions are imposed. I worry about international Jewish communities in the diaspora. We could see terrorist attacks there. We could see terrorist attacks, especially on European soil against Jewish targets, because it is the European countries that are spearheading the reimposition of those sanctions against the Islamic Republic of Iran. And so I think the regime could retaliate also by maybe attacking American or European ships in the Persian Gulf. But I think attacking Jewish and Israeli communities abroad could be another part of its retaliation. Whether these reimposition of these sanctions will force the regime to return to the nuclear deal, I think there's more than 50% chance that the regime will start negotiations because of the reimposition of these sanctions. Iran has a major electricity problem, electricity production deficit, something like 30,000 megawatts, which is an incredible amount. You would need, it's like 30 gigawatts, and I think you need numerous, I think at least 5 or 6 nuclear power stations to be built from tonight till tomorrow just to meet part of that, and we know that's not going to happen. But there's also, on top of electricity shortage, there's water shortage in Iran now, which is incredible. People are having to store water. We're talking about a country, one of the oldest civilizations, a country with the world's second biggest gas reserves and the world's fourth biggest oil reserves, and people are having to store water in their homes. There's water shortages 6 or 7 hours sometimes 2 or 3. This is in addition to electricity power cuts in Iran. So I think these factors will, if these factors could impact in the long run the regime's decision to return to the nuclear deal. But in the meanwhile, I think it will try to lash out, and as I stated, the diaspora Jewish communities could be one of the potential targets. We also have to wait and see where President Trump goes with this. If the Iranians, for the state of Israel, there are at least 2 red lines when it comes to deciding whether to attack the Islamic Republic of Iran again, or to start a new war as it did on the 13th of June again or not. There's at least 2 red lines. One of them is if the Iranian regime tries to rebuild its missile program. I think that's a red line for the Israeli government. And the other red line is if the Iranian regime tries to rebuild its nuclear program. I think that's another major red line for the state of Israel. And I think to enable Israel to attack, if the Iranians cross these red lines, we will need the coordination and assistance of President Trump. It's very important for us to continue our cooperation with President Trump. The US Air Force, its participation in the previous war was very important. We did not have the explosives to blow up the Fordo enrichment site. The Americans did, because it's so well built inside a mountain. And the Americans had what is called the mother of all bombs, MOAB, which penetrated it. And there's debate regarding how much damage it has caused, but I think the consensus is that it's generally they suffered quite significant damage. And I think the fact that the Iranian regime tries to build a nuclear enrichment center so deep inside a mountain that you need a mega bomb to blow it up, I think that's just one reason not to believe the claims by the Islamic Republic of Iran that its nuclear program is for civilian purposes only. So there's also what is happening in the region. I think that's another factor that has pushed the Iranian regime towards expanding the military aspects of its nuclear program, which is why Israel attacked. I think the October 7th decision by Hamas, its consequences, I think, have generally been quite bad for the Iranians. Because there's some debates. Some people say the Iranians knew the date of the attack. Some people say they didn't know the exact date of the attack. But I think what everybody agrees with is that the Iranians knew something's in the offing, because the Revolutionary Guard was training Hamas people in Syria in use of paragliders, which we saw on October 7th, and also in Iran. And 2 days after the October 7th massacre, on the same day that Hezbollah it started bombarding Israel. Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, said the hands and the forehead of those who carry out these attacks should be kissed. So he blessed the attackers. But as we saw, ultimately the consequences of that attack led to the severe weakening of Hamas. I think Hamas is without doubt severely weakened. It will take quite a few years for it to get back on its feet again. But of course, not if we have anything to do with it. Hezbollah is now greatly weakened. We could really not imagine how weak Hezbollah has become. It's just truly magnificent. The Syrian regime fell apart. That's basically because of the Turks. The Turks were happy to see Iran weakened, because the Turks and the Iranians competed for influence in Syria. But the Turks got there first, and they managed to overthrow the Syrian regime. But make no mistake, al-Jolani, the new Syrian leader, his group was supported by the Turks before he succeeded in overthrowing the Assad regime. And that was another major setback for the Iranians. But I think, of course, the biggest setback was the 13th of June attack by the State of Israel. First of all, I have to say, this is not a war we wanted. This is a war that was imposed on the State of Israel. The State of Israel, after the Iranian Revolution, tried to reach a deal, tried to establish relations with the Islamic regime. We even sold weapons to the Iranian regime to attack Saddam, because in the 80s, our biggest threat was Saddam Hussein. And so Iran was fighting Saddam Hussein. And this was an opportunity for the State of Israel to weaken the Iraqi dictator, and also as an opportunity to build bridges with the post-Shah regime. The State of Israel started supplying weapons to the Iranian regime so that it is used against the Iraqis, who were our common enemy. And we were hoping that after the war, the Iranian regime would say, look, you helped us during the war. We have common interests. Let's put aside all this death to Israel, and let's start having relations, maybe even in secret. But that didn't happen. Instead of Israeli weapons that were sold to Iran were crucial for the defense of Iranian territory during Iraq's attacks. But what we got instead for helping Iran defend itself against Saddam Hussein was in 1991, the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, declaring proxy war against the State of Israel by inviting the heads of Islamic Jihad, the head of Hezbollah, head of Hamas, to Tehran around the same time when we started the Madrid peace talks between Israel and the PLO. And the Islamic Republic basically declared that anybody who wants to make peace with the Israelis is our enemy. and we are going to support them militarily and financially. So they started undermining the peace process, especially Oslo II peace process, which was derailed because of the sheer number of suicide bombings. Every time Israel drew from Palestinian territory, there were more bombings by Hamas and Islamic Jihad, and these were financed also by Iran. So that ultimately was one of the major reasons why the peace talks did not succeed. But we've seen over time, since especially 1991, thousands of Israelis killed and injured by Iranian suicide attacks, proxy attacks against the state of Israel. And I think one of the reasons why we ultimately decided to attack on the 13th of June was because Israel wanted to create a deterrence against the Iranian regime directly. Because until then, the Iranian regime had been paying proxies to attack us. And one of the goals was to say, okay, we're helping proxies so that we can deny responsibility. So we can say it's not us, it's Hezbollah that's attacked Israel. So Israel should attack Hezbollah, not Iran. Or it's the Houthis that are attacking Israel, not Iran. So they try to deny responsibility, to hide behind their proxies. But I think that game was over. First and foremost, after the support of the Iranian regime for October 7th, I think the Israeli government decided, proxy or not, attacks by Iran are going to be considered as a direct attacks from its territory against the state of Israel. And then, of course, in 2024, in April, and if I'm not mistaken, in October, the Iranian regime launched two direct attacks against the state of Israel from its territory, which was unprecedented. And I also think that led to the realization that the state of Israel cannot continue with this. The Iranian regime must be attacked directly so that it is deterred from supporting proxies, and it is deterred from attacking Israeli territory directly in the future. And of course, these were some of the reasons. The biggest reason was that Israeli intelligence had found that Iran had started developing part of its the military part of its nuclear program. For example, in Isfahan, or the city of my parents, in the nuclear sites, they had created infrastructure to convert highly enriched uranium to metal, which is what you need to do to make a nuclear bomb. And I think these things just made the Israeli intelligence community jump 5 feet. And the decision was made to attack against the Iranian regime on the 13th of June. It was a phenomenally successful attack by the Israeli Air Force, especially, and the Israeli intelligence community. But this is not the end. It's not even the end of the beginning. We are just this is a war that is going to continue for a while. The Iranians are convinced we're going to attack again soon. I don't know, but as I said, we have two red lines. One of them is the rebuilding of the nuclear program, and the other one is the rebuilding of the missile program. I think if the Iranian regime tries to do that, then I think we could have a war on our hands. But we would also need Mr. President Trump to support us. But until then, people in Iran are convinced, the Iranian public is convinced that Israel is going to attack again because the Iranian regime is not showing any compromise. And because of Israel's attack, there were numerous miracles by the Israeli attack. One of them was that, thankfully, thank God, touch wood, not one of our aircraft was shot down. There were so many thousands of sorties over Iranian territory, and of course over Syrian and Iraqi territory to get there. And I think another miracle in Iran was that the price of real estate in Tehran dropped, and it continues to drop today. I don't know what the direction of price of real estate is in Sydney or other parts of your great country, but in Tehran, it's basically like an Iranian missile. It just kept going up and up and up, and people just can't live with this, the high living expenses. I mean, I think relative to income, Tehran is more unaffordable than Tel Aviv, and I'm sure you know. I think those of you who have lived in Israel know that's really saying something. But now people are not buying property. People in Iran are not buying property because they believe that there will be another war. So why should I go and buy property now when the value of the dollar is going to collapse again? So I think the Iranian regime is in a tight spot. I think they're going to challenge us. And as I said, one of the things that concerns me is the diaspora Jewish communities, which is why we all have to be on our toes. I see there are 32 questions, if I'm not mistaken, here. Okay, so a lot of it. We have numerous questions here. I think, Tanil, can I just ask for a 2-minute bathroom break, and I'll come back and we'll continue. I'll answer the questions.
Yes, certainly. We'll cut now to our CEO, Robert Gregory, who'll do a promotion
Good.
for our event next week, and we'll see you in a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Mhm.
Right, Robert Gregory, our CEO. Um,
Thank
Robert.
you. Thank you, Tadeo. And yeah, thank you very much to Dr. Javedanfar. That was a very good talk. I can see we've got a very, very large audience today. So it's good after quite a few weeks to have everyone back. And we've got our Zoom crowd, we've got all the people watching on Facebook. And to those of you who will be watching the recording later, I'll just give you a quick update about next week while we're waiting for our guest to come back. So next week we have an important talk about how recognizing this fictitious state of Palestine breaches international law. And obviously it's very timely with what the Australian government's doing, what other governments around the world are doing, and with what will be coming up in the United Nations in September. Our guest is Dr. Michael Calvo, who's a very learned international law expert and author on these issues. So that's really good. And while we are also waiting for our guest to come back, it's a good time to update everyone about the Israel trip we just did, which was very amazing, and some of the events that have been happening in Australia. A lot of you would have been at the Simcha Rothman talk. That was very eventful for AJA. So there's really been a lot going on AJA wise. And we have a lot more exciting things coming up. Maybe Tennille will tell us about some of them.
Yes, I'd like to preview and ask everybody to please save the date for October 8th. Just to give you a bit of an update on the Zooms that are coming up, we are back with our weekly AJ Zoom for the next 3 Wednesdays. So that's the 3rd, the 10th, and the 17th. We will then be taking a short break due to the Chagim. We have Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and then Sukkot. However, we are asking you, even though it is Wednesday, October 8th, we are running a very, very special live Zoom with a survivor from the Nova Festival. So Sukkot, the Chag will finish at 7:41 p.m. We will hold our Zoom at 8 p.m. as per usual, but we really do ask you to save the date, hold that date, October 8th. We have a beautiful woman. Her name is Rita. She calls herself Wonder Rita, and she really is a wonder. So please save that date for our October 7. It's 2 years since that fateful day, and we'd really love you to be a part of our live Zoom with a Nova survivor recognizing that date. I can see our guest is back and ready for our question and answer. Thank you. So actually, Robert's going to kick off the Q&A, please.
Okay, yeah, I'll ask a quick question, and I'll also just say, just on one of the points you made about the Australian government, while we agree they did act to expel the ambassador and to prescribe the RGC, it was quite slow. Our organization, we in 2022, we made these submissions to Parliament that this should be done, and we'd been calling for this many times, warning of what could happen, and working with some of our Persian friends as well here, putting out statements to do both of those things, to both expel the ambassador and prescribe the RGC. So we were a bit disappointed with the delays, but eventually, obviously, they came around. And so that my question will be, we do work with many Persian people, and what are your thoughts on is there a chance of regime change in Iran? Is it realistic? And what could happen on that front?
I think regime changes in Iran is the one of the biggest wishes of 99% of Iranians abroad, and 80%, at least 80% of Iranians in Iran. We all wish and pray for it. We would love to see a democratic Iran, but I'm not optimistic. I'm sorry. I would love to be optimistic, and I hope I'm wrong. And I hope we meet next year in Tehran, and you can tell me, Mayor, you were wrong to see the regime fell, but I don't see it. This is a very brutal regime. People usually use the example of the Soviet regime, the mighty Soviet regime falling on the 25th of December 1991, when it disintegrated. There's a big difference between the Iranian regime and the Soviets. Gorbachev was not willing to massacre his own people in great numbers. The Iranian regime is willing to do that. And I think that creates a deterrence. Every time we see major demonstration protests by the people of Iran, the regime just goes after them. It shoots them, it kills them. It uses pellet guns to shoot people in the eye so that they're permanently disabled, and also to set an example to others. We saw after the woman life freedom uprising, which you remember, by Mahsa Amini, after she was killed, there was a campaign of poison gassing girls in numerous schools in Iran. I think 300 or 400 girls were suffered from poison gas. The regime wanted to deter them. So this is a really nasty regime. I hope it falls, but I'm not optimistic, and which is why I think we're going to see even more immigration from Iran to places such as Australia. There was an interesting article about a village in northern Iran, and it said all of its young men now live in Australia, which is very interesting. And I think they generally want to they are generally anti-regime and want to have good relations with Israel. But again, but the regime is, I think, it's not going anywhere.
Thank you. We'll go to Hugh Kitson. Would you like to unmute, please?
Hello, Dr. Meir. There's no doubt that Israel and the US has severely decapitated the Iranian nuclear program. Today, we've seen a former foreign minister from Australia and also a former state premier in Beijing with North Korea, with Vladimir Putin from Russia. My question is, what chance is there that Iran might turn to a rogue country like North Korea to get its nuclear arms to try and destroy Israel?
It's a realistic chance. No respectable Israeli intelligence organization worth its salt would dismiss such a possibility. Because in 1990, the Iranian defense minister Shamkhani, who was actually one of the targets during the recent war, he turned up in Pakistan. He turned up in Islamabad expecting to buy a ready-made bomb from the Pakistanis, and the Pakistanis said, "Excuse me, this is not I'm paraphrasing here. This is not a supermarket. It's not. We're willing to help you." The rogue Pakistani nuclear scientist A.Q. Khan gave them designs of centrifuges and helped them develop their nuclear program. But I said, "No, I'm not going to give you a bomb." So would they want to do that with the North Koreans? I assume so. But whether North Koreans would agree to such a demand, I think that's a question for a North Korean expert.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. An, would you like to unmute?
Hello. So my question is for today: if the Islamic regime in Iran was voted out overnight, and their funding to terrorist proxy was cut off completely, will there be a chance for peace in the Middle East now that these terrorist organizations no longer have any more funding from Iran?
Of course, it would help. It would help tremendously. It would help tremendously. Groups such as Hezbollah, groups such as Islamic Jihad, partially Hamas, of course the Houthis. The Houthis, they are so poor in that country. It's the poorest part of Europe, in the Middle East. It is the poorest country in the Middle East, and they still have slavery. They still have slavery in parts of Yemen. It's that backwards. The Houthis have plunged that country into civil war. So they get all these missiles for free. Iran gives all these weapons to them for free. Or who propped up Hezbollah all these years with hundreds of billions of dollars of support? It's the Iranian regime. Of course, it would be a huge blow to terrorism in this region. But I have to say today, one of the biggest, another after Iran, and another big supporter of terrorism is Qatar. Al Jazeera Arabic. It's horrendous the amount of lies and the amount of pro-Hamas information that it puts out. And of course, the number of people who watch Al Jazeera Arabic is astronomically higher than anything the Iranian regime produces in Arabic. We have a serious problem with Qatar as well. Now, I don't want to get into your relationship with Qatar, that's your business, or the US relationship with Qatar. But the Qataris have worked out a way whereby they buy properties and they buy investments in other countries. They have good relations with universities, and they also allow the Americans to build the biggest base the Americans have in the Middle East on their territory. So it's difficult to criticize and to isolate them. It's not like the Iranians who are looking forward to killing Americans or try to kill Americans. The Qataris have great relations with America and other countries, including European countries. So yes, Iran is the biggest sponsor of terrorism, but please don't ignore the poison, the absolute poison that comes out of Qatar, the Qatari channel, especially Al Jazeera Arabic.
Thank you. We'll go to Takahiro. Would you like to unmute, please?
Thank you very much for invite this lecture almost every week. My question is most of same Mr. Gregory, but Dr. Javedanfar, is it very difficult if Western allies makes efforts to caress of minority of not Persian in Iran? Despite I think it takes more than 46 years from Iranian Revolution, it's very difficult crack between Persian to no Persian peoples. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't advise any government, Israeli or Australian, to support wars between minorities in Iran and the Persian people, because Iranians love their country. I'm an Iranian. I'm Israeli, of course, but I'm an Iranian, and Iranians feel any foreign power coming in and trying to pit different minorities against each other is something that is viewed and rejected by regime supporters and anti-regime supporters. And there's a history of it. The Soviet Union, I don't know if you guys know, in 1941, the Soviet Union via Stalin and Britain invaded Iran in 1941 because the Iranian, just father of the Shah, had economic relations with Hitler, not political, but economic. They saw that as a threat. They invaded Iran. They expelled them. And of course, the Americans joined in later on to use Iranian territory to supply weapons to the Soviets to fight the Germans. 10% of all Soviet weapons during World War II were from the United States and using Iranian territory. So according to the agreement that they had, all the occupying powers had to leave Iran 6 months after the World War II. The British, God bless them, packed up, left, no problem. Americans packed up, left, no problem. Stalin? Oh no. Oh no. Stalin thought that there is oil in the Caspian Sea in northern Iran. He wanted to bully the Iranians to give him concessions, and to pressure them, he helped create an autonomous Azerbaijan Republic in Iran. There's an Azerbaijan Republic outside of Iran on the border, but there's also one on the Iranian side. We have two Azerbaijan provinces. So he helped create an autonomous Azerbaijan Republic and an autonomous Kurdish Republic in Mahabad to pressure Iran. And this is something that Iranians reject. Anybody who supports minorities attacking against each other in Iran is supporting war against the Iranian people. Our war is not against the Iranian people. Our war is against the Islamic Republic of Iran. Why? Because it's a declared war on the state of Israel. We did, Mr. Yoshioka, we did not want this war. Israel, on numerous occasions when there were earthquakes in Iran, wanted to help. We helped during the Iran-Iraq war, but this is a war that's been declared on us by the regime, and we see the regime as our enemy and not the people of Iran.
Thank you. We had a question come in the chat earlier about the daily lives and the rights of the Jewish people currently living in Iran. The question was, are they allowed to leave, and what does it look like for them?
That's a great question. From 1979 to 1995, it was hell for Iranian Jews to leave. The regime refused them. Many left immediately after the revolution, but from a year after the revolution, it didn't allow Jews to leave. So there were many tens of thousands were smuggled out by the Jewish agency via the Pakistani border. And from Pakistan, they were flown to Turkey to come to Israel, or to Austria to go to the United States. In Iran, we believed it's the Jewish agency, but it turns out now that it was the Mossad. But thankfully, in Iran, we didn't know the Jews. We didn't know it was the Mossad that was doing it. But there was tens of thousands. I was lucky. I was one of the lucky ones. We managed to find somebody to bribe in 1987, and we got an exit visa to fly out of Iran for 2 weeks to go to a wedding. So we left in March 1987, and for all intents and purposes, I'm still at that wedding because I haven't gone back. Talk about Greek weddings lasting long. This is nothing. This is so till 1995, it was being Jewish. It was, you used to get a red exit. First of all, you didn't get a passport. Also, this is why Jews had to escape illegally via Pakistan. Or when I, as a Jew, used to get a red stamp, and which meant that if I went back to Iran, I would have to reapply for an exit visa, which, forget it, I wasn't going to do that, even though I lived in England for 17 years and I could have done that. That's until 1995. From 1995 until now, it's 99% of Iranian Jews get their passport in 2 weeks and can leave. It's incredible. It's incredible. Till about 4 or 5 years ago, they used to come to Israel. They used to go to Turkey and fly to Israel and go back to Iran. They can take out their property. Had uncles in Iran who sold their property. They left Iran in 2002. No problem. Got their passport, went to Austria, waited for 6 months. So they can leave. Before October 7th, they could have left, and they could have taken all the property. But now it's more difficult because of the war. Also because it's become more difficult to go to the United States because of President Trump. But in theory, to leave, it's really not a problem. Now, in Iran, as long as the regime is not looking, if the regime is looking for you and you're Jewish, then that makes it worse, okay? If the regime, if you go to court and you're Jewish, that's not a good situation. You don't want it. You're probably going to lose. Or if you work in a university or a government institutions for promotions, it's difficult for being Jewish. But if you have your own business, which is 99% of Jews in Iran, who have also deal a lot with property and also they have their own shops, they have their lives. There are synagogues. There's at least 10 synagogues in Tehran. I saw a clip from my synagogue. I haven't been there since '87. It was like looking at a parallel universe. Our synagogue was on the second floor. On the first floor, where we had the cheder, where we learned Hebrew, where we had parties. I just saw a video that turned it into a nice kosher restaurant. And Iranian Jews live. They have their lives. But after October 7th, there was about 20 Iranian Jews that were arrested by the regime. And it's difficult to know exactly how many have been released, but from my understanding, most of them have been released by now. Some are still in custody. But generally speaking, Iranian Jews live, they have their own lives. So the question is, why don't they leave? If they can leave, and they can leave, why don't they leave? Why don't they just get up and go? Young people leave, but for older generations, it's very difficult. They come to the US, they come to Israel. The shock is huge, absolutely huge. They have a very difficult time finding work. And also when they sell the property in Tehran, they could be living in a penthouse in Tehran, but the Iranian currency is so, for better use of the word, trash, that you take that and you can barely buy a 2-bedroom house in Holon in Tel Aviv. So there's a real fall in the standard of living. And that has, psychological impact, mental health impact. It impacts relations between wives and husbands. So those that are still there, I think this is one of the reasons they have not left. But most Iranian Jews have left by now.
Thank you. We want to shift the topic now to Turkey. Turkey's rising influence in the region. Do you think that Iran is viewing Turkey now as a potential ally for the future or more of a rival?
Amazing question. Rival. They love it when the Turks attack us. And our relationship with Turkey is not going to a good place. Mr. Erdogan, after October 7th, said Israel is not, Hamas is not a terrorist organization. Let's just let that sink in. I'm sure you have one. I've met lots of Turkish people. They're wonderful. I'm sure you have a big Turkish community in Australia. Wonderful country, incredible country. Breaks my heart. It breaks my heart what Erdogan has done to our relationship with the Turks. But he hates us with passion. He hosts Hamas. He's a rival of the Iranians. The Iranians were very angry that the Assad regime was overthrown by a pro-Turkish politician or terrorist or whatever you want to call him, Jolani. So they're rivals, but if the Turks are fighting Israel or in disputes with Israel, then the Iranians cheer them from the sidelines.
And while we're on our global apex, we can't miss without talking about Russia.
Which aspect of Mr. Putin? Because he's multifaceted.
Let's talk about the rising sort of coalition, Russia, China, Iran.
Very good question. Very good. I think President Trump wants the war in Ukraine to end. So to end the war in Ukraine, he wants to strangle Russia economically. To strangle Russia economically, he has to go after one of the biggest buyers of Russian oil. One of the biggest buyers of Russian oil is India. So he sanctioned India, Prime Minister Modi, excuse me. And now that has actually pushed the Chinese and the Indians together, which is unfathomable because they had a very bad relationship. But now they're being pushed together. They have created this organization called BRICS, which I'm sure you know. The Russians and the Chinese are the leaders. So is India. They are working together, but it's not a united front. The Russians and the Chinese use Iran as a bargaining tool to pressure America to serve their own interests. But it's not a military alliance. the Russians did not help the Iranians during that war. And if this newspaper report is to be believed, and I'm saying this is a newspaper report, the Iranians used a system, a Russian anti-aircraft system called S-300. According to an article in 2015, the Greeks who have this system during the air exercise, allowed the Israeli Air Force to practice against these radars, which would not have happened without Russian consent. Of course, the Greeks later on denied it, but I think soon after the war, soon after Israel launched this attack, Israel was was incredibly successful in taking down these very same S-300s. They were knocked out one after the other, and Israel was able to destroy most of the Russian anti-aircraft systems that Iran had, and we have command of the skies over Iran. And I don't know if that's because of Russian cooperation. That article says that they allowed us to practice against their radar system, so maybe. But the Iranians are convinced that Putin helped Israel in that war, even though they helped Putin in Ukraine. Iranian drones, I don't know if they actually supplied missiles, so I have to be accurate here. But the Iranian drones were crucial, absolutely vital for the Russian campaign in Ukraine. But Putin doesn't feel that he has to reciprocate. So there is a relationship between Iran, China, and Russia, but it's not a military alliance. They help Iran on an ad hoc basis as long as it doesn't threaten their relations with the United States.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we are out of time for this evening. So to finish up, is there anything you'd like to leave us with or like to say, a message of hope where there is a lot of despair about this deep-seated Iranian threat that's coming into our country, especially, and to Israel?
I think we Jewish people have never lost hope, and we will never lose hope. We have been in darker situations than we are now. And as somebody who's been living in Israel since October 7th, I have to tell you, these are very difficult times. The hostages are still there. We have people going. We have lost more than 800 soldiers in this war. We've been through numerous attacks by Iran, but we shall not falter. We will continue. We will continue. We will stand up on our feet, and we will defend our country with everything we have, with a heavy heart, with tears in our eyes because of what has been happening to our country since October 7th, and because we have our sons who are still in the tunnels of Hamas. Despite all this, we shall march on, and we will overcome. And I can tell you that now and in the future, we will always remember our friends who stood with us at our darkest times. And that is you. You are part of it. All of you. You're part of it. And we will forever be grateful for standing with us during these very, very difficult times. Thank you.
Dr. Meir, we thank you for your time today, for your expertise, for your wonderful presentation on Iran and the globe. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. I really hope that Robert, I, and our next delegation, when we are in Israel on our AJ Israel Tour 2026, we will have the opportunity to come and see you in person, to hear from you again. To everyone, I can see some wonderful thank yous that are coming through the chat. We have had a wonderful night. Again, everybody, that is Dr. Meir Javedanfar. You can look out for his articles. He writes for The Guardian. He's at Reichman University. I do have his details if anyone does want to follow him or keep in touch in the future. I'll remind everybody that this is recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel. We've just got your Twitter handle there. It's at Meirja, Meir J-A. So please give him a follow on X, Twitter, and have a wonderful evening. We look forward to seeing everybody next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.